Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I am Anara Tabashaliva, along with co-hosts Dr. Victor Fett, Dr. Katerina Shrey, and our program producer, Professor Larry Shrey. We host a weekly discussion panel on Russia's war on Ukraine with guests from Ukraine, military experts, medical personnel, academics, artists, literary figures, and relief workers. Our panel is recorded and circulated nationally and internationally. We appreciate your comments and feedback. Special thanks to Marshall University Libraries and MUIT for making this weekly event possible. If you are joining us live on Teams, please feel free to use the chat to post any questions for our guests. A quick greetings to our viewers from Ukraine from Professor Katerina Shrey.
Вітаємо наших слухачів в Україні з глибоким покліном. Ми далі свідки вашого страшного терпіння і також вашої великої сили. Дякую вам за вашу участь в нашій тижневій програмі.
Thank you, Katerina. Today's guest will be introduced by Dr. Victor Fett.
Thank you, Anara. I'm very glad and honored to welcome back Dr. Mikhail Epstein from Emory University, Atlanta, Georgia, who was our guest before last year, speaking on the Russian anti-world. And today his talk is titled, "Is This a Religious War on New Russian Apocalypticism?" Mikhail Epstein is a Russian-American literary scholar and essayist who is professor of cultural theory and Russian literature at Emory University since 1990. His many credits and books and activities are listed in our announcement. He is an expert on Russian philosophy, especially on 19th and 20th centuries, on religious and philosophers, thinkers like Nikolai Berdyaev, and author of numerous essays on cultural, social, and international issues, as well as many books. Dr. Epstein, please talk to us.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It is an honor for me to talk about the events with the audience, which is so deeply immersed in the meaning of this historical catastrophe that is evolving before our eyes. I will be talking about Russian war against Ukraine, and not so much war as about Russian state of mind, political mind, and religious mind, in the connection of these two aspects, political and religious. The question that is in the title, is this a religious war? On the first glance, it seems that the natural question would be no, because there is seemingly no contradictions, religious contradictions between Russia and Ukraine, because they have the majority, vast majority of population, absolutely the same religious identity, Eastern Orthodoxy, shared heritage for many centuries, and there is no any causes for military actions regarding the religious coexistence. Nevertheless, and this is the point of my presentation, I will try to show that the very deep and most dangerous aspects of the current events have religious or religious political nature. Let me move to my first slide, because there is so many materials that I wanted to include, and the time is limited. I will be mostly reading my presentation from the slides, and also because so many terms and concepts may be not quite familiar to the audience. But of course, I will connect these slides in my explanations, and will be happy to handle any questions that could emerge after that. So, new Russian apocalyptic ideology. I emphasize ideology. It is mixture of religious and political entities that is so unique. for this kind of ideology. In the post-Soviet era, a new pseudo-religious ideology has formed in Russia. It has absorbed state-sponsored orthodoxy, the pagan cult of the soil, the Eurasian, I will explain what is Eurasianism later, hatred of the West, traits of Nazi ideology, and archaic cults of war and the realm of the dead. This is a kind of apocalypticism. I don't know how exactly to pronounce. Some people say apocalypticism, some apocalypticism. I would say apocalypticism, though apocalypticism is also possible. This is a kind of apocalypticism inheriting the darkest traits of Gnosticist heresy of the first century and cursing all existence, for it lies in evil. Hence, the drive to consign the whole world to purifying fire, to arrange a man-made end of the world, relying on the destructive power of nuclear weapons. This is a very short preamble. And then I will, so to say, develop these points. Regarding Russian spiritual traditions, as presented in Nikolai Berdyaev, one of the most important Russian philosophers of the 20th century, in his work, The Russian Idea. We Russians are apocalyptic or nihilistic. We are apocalyptic or nihilist because we are striving for the end and poorly understand the stage of the historical process, hostile to pure form. In Orthodoxy, the eschatological, that means end of the world, side of Christianity was more strongly expressed. And in Russian nihilism can be distinguished ascetic and eschatological elements. The Russian people are the people of the end, not the middle of the historical process. So what Berdyaev here means that there is a connection between two seemingly different sides of Russian mentality. On the one hand, nihilism and asceticism, that means some contempt to the existing world and its material embodiment. And on the other hand, expectation of the end of the world. And these two trends actually coming from the same mental paradigm could be traced through the history of Russian philosophy, Russian literature, Russian spirituality, this combination of nihilism and apocalypticism. And we see now its culminational points, as I will try to show. My next several slides will be devoted to the place of Russian Orthodoxy, the religion of Russian Church, of Moscow Patriarchate, to the world Orthodoxy, to the ecumenical Patriarchate, which is located in Istanbul, in Constantinople, and is considered to be, it's not like Rome in relation to the Catholic world, but this church, this patriarchate, is considered to be the first among the equal in the Orthodox world. And Russia adopted its Christianity in its Orthodox form from Constantinople. And the very fact of belonging of Russian Orthodox Church to the world Christianity is relying on the connection between Moscow and ecumenical patriarchate. In 2018, after, okay, I should make another explanation. Ukrainian Orthodox Church was mostly considered to be part of Moscow Patriarchate because these parishes, these church institutions existed in the same state in Russia, then in the Soviet Union. But after Ukraine acquired its state sovereignty, there came the issue of separation of the churches. and it became especially pronounced after the annexation of Crimea and after beginning of the full-scale war in 2022. In 2018, the Ecumenical Patriarchate recognized the autocephalous, that means independent, sovereign Ukrainian Church. And as a result, the Russian Orthodox Church sharply turned onto the path of new schism, Raskol, and decided to separate from the Universal Orthodoxy and became spirit and jurisdiction schismatic. Schismatics is the name, or Raskolniki is the name of part of Orthodox who split from the major Russian Orthodox Church in the 17th century, because at that time Russian Orthodox Church tried to update its connections with Mother Church, with Constantinople Church, and the minority of Russian Orthodox, they split from the mainstream church, and they were called schismatics or raskolnik or old believers. The mainstream was called Nikonians because this was the name of the Russian patriarch of that time, who adopted these reforms that made Russian Church closer to its Greek originals and roots, according in the matters of liturgy and clergy books and so on and so on. So now the Russian Orthodox Church, as it started breaking its connection with Constantinople, actually moved back from the Nikonian reforms of the 17th century, which at that time brought Russian Orthodoxy closer to the Greek. And thus now Russian Orthodoxy ceased to be a Greek Catholic or Greek Russian Church, as it was often officially called before 2018. On October 16, 2018, the Synod, this is the Supreme Council of the Russian Orthodox Church, completely ceases Eucharistic, that means through liturgy, communion with the Constantinople Patriarchate. So now not only the Western Catholic and Protestant world, but also the modern Orthodox world, and first of all the fraternal Ukrainian, lie, according to official ideology, lie in evil and have given themselves over to the Antichrist. So the Russian Church became, so to say, in its own eyes, the only true Christian church in the world. Now that it broke not only with Catholicism, like the entire Byzantine Orthodox Church in 1054, 1000 years ago, but now it broke from the Byzantine Church, from world Orthodoxy as well. Let's move to the next slide. What kind of heresy is involved here? Even back in 1872, the Orthodox Council in Constantinople condemned the heresy of ethnophilitism. Ethnophilitism means tribalism, ethnical racism. Ethnophilitism is a form of ecclesiastic racism or tribalism, the sacrifice of general church interest to national political tribal interests. Even then, in the 19th century, it was obvious that Russian Orthodoxy was obsessed with the idea of subordinating religion to the interests of the state. A century and a half later, in 2022, at the height of Russia's war with Ukraine, Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew emphasized the worldwide danger of this heresy and the schismatic policy of the Russian Orthodox Church in his keynote speech at the International Conference for Reasonably Open World. Let's move to the next slide. He said, after the fall of communism, faith has once again be used for ideological purposes. The Russian Orthodox Church has sided with the regime of President Vladimir Putin, especially after the election of his beatified Patriarch Kirill in 2009 as Russian Patriarch to succeed the previous Patriarch Alexei. It is actively involved in promoting the ideology of the Russian world. This ideology is a tool to legitimize Russian expansionism and the basis of its Eurasian strategy. The connection with the past of ethnophiliatism and the present of the Russian world is obvious. Thus, faith becomes the basis of the Putin's regime's ideology. This is what Bartholomew said in 2022. So we see here the split between the universal orthodoxy as represented by the Ecumenical Patriarchate and Moscow Patriarchate, Russian Orthodox Church. Let's move to the next slide. This is how the Ecumenical Patriarch labeled the ecumenical means spreading its spiritual authority to the entire sphere of the orthodoxy. This is how the Ecumenical Patriarch labeled the schismatic nature of modern Russian ecclesiastical orthodoxy as a powerful, politically motivated nationalist sect. Now, to the etatism of Russian orthodoxy has been added militarism, not only political but also apocalyptic, since the Church supports the state's desire to prepare its citizens not only to die for their homeland, but also, in the event of military defeat, for the death of the entire world. Let's move further. Thank you. I would like to make a certain digression to remember Dostoevsky and his novel The Brothers Karamazov, where the Grand Inquisitor speaks about 3 towers of Babel. One was described in the Bible, the attempt of the humankind to build this tower to reach the heaven was refuted by God, who mixed all languages, as you remember. The second and the third towers are those Dostoevsky's prophecies, prophecy about the 20th century and about the 21st century. About the 20th century, Dostoevsky says, and this novel was published in 1880, that this is Grand Inquisitor, who is inheritor of Christianity, speaks to Jesus Christ, who appears to him in the 16th century. This is a fable, this is a legend, but it is so politically and religiously actual for the time of Dostoevsky and for our time that it is cited as, I would say, political prediction almost. So we know what happened in the 20th century and what Grand Inquisitor says to Jesus, silently standing before him, that the century passes and your parishes, your people will revolt against us and try to build the second Tower of Babel. They will say that we want to be fed before to be virtuous. And so they built their new Tower of Babel on godlessness and materialism. I'm retelling in my own words. And this came true in the 20th century with atheism, with Soviet kind of mass and state godlessness, destruction of tens of thousands of churches and killing tens of thousands of priests, and I don't need to tell this story. But what remains often unnoticed is that there is also the third Tower of Babel, which reaches the prophecy of Grand Inquisitor of Dostoevsky through the character of Grand Inquisitor to the 21st century. They will fail, Grand Inquisitor says. They will fail with their new Tower of Babel And the priests, the clergy, that by that time will be dispersed and persecuted and living in catacombs, they were called back. For they, and then I will cite from Dostoevsky, for they will come to us after 1,000 years of agony with their tower. They will seek us again, hidden underground in the catacombs, where we shall again be persecuted and tortured, as it used to be in the Soviet Union. They will find us and cry to us, feed us, for those who have promised us fire from heaven, heaven given it. And then we shall finish building their tower, for he finishes the building who feeds them, and we alone shall feed them in thy name, declaring falsely that it is in thy name. So what is described here is not atheism, but a kind of theocracy, when priests will again recover their power and will use their political power, or political power will use them in order to build the third Tower of Babel, and this will be indestructible. It will not be atheism as the war against God, but it will be imitation of God, so to say. As we will see from the next slide, the prophecy as exposed in one of Apostles' epistles, this explains that the godless state of the socialists and communists was only a precursor of Antichrist's arrival. Atheism is building a kingdom of violence, open in its hatred of God, but it is not yet a kingdom of lies and substitution, which will be erected precisely as a church, shepherding the nations by the holy name of God. In thy name, and we will lie that in thy name. If Satan, according to the Bible, was the first rebel, Lucifer was the first rebel against God, the Antichrist will appear as his false likeness. The new strategy of the Antichrist, postponed to the end of time, is not rebellion, but likening himself to God. A man of, and this is from the New Testament, a man of iniquity, condemned to destruction, he will even take his seat in the temple of God and pretend to be God. This is what believing observers and non-believing observers and analysts conclude about what is happening in Russia after in its transition from atheism to the new kind of theocracy. Let's go to the next slide. This is a main temple of the Russian armed forces near Moscow. It was finished and consecrated in 2020, precisely in anticipation of the war, full-scale war against Ukraine that Russia launched 2 years ago. And even if you see at the external side of this Cathedral of Armed Forces, you will be, how to say, distressed, troubled by its appearance. I will describe, and also by its interior. I will show you the interior and then make certain conclusions about what kind of, yes, this is the interior of the cathedral, and this is the service that is guided by Patriarch Kirill in the church. This is the image of Godmother, and you see that she is more like a demon, and the very atmosphere, this green khaki color in the cathedral, which is designed to express khaki, the color of military uniform. It looks very ominous, very, how to say, dark and completely devoid of this feast-like light, gladdening atmosphere that is peculiar to Christian churches and cathedrals. Let's move to the next slide. As early as 1891, Konstantin Leontiev, a very important Russian philosopher, predicted that in 100 years Russia would give birth to the Antichrist. It is enough to look at the main temple of the Russian armed forces near Moscow, consecrated in 2020, to feel alarmed. Is it not the temple of the one who will take his place in the temple of God? The sanctuary looks intimidating both inside and outside. In its coloring, gold barely breaks through the dusky green, the color of either drab olive or khaki. High pointed domes on the towers resemble ballistic missiles, and this is very true. They are like rockets, especially if you look at this from certain distance. Let's go back. There are 4 aisles in the temple, and each one is dedicated to some saint and at the same time to some kind of weapon. Thus, for example, Saint Barbara, the great martyr, is appointed patroness of the strategic nuclear missile forces. It seems incredible, but this is the reality of contemporary Russian church orientation, which is so clear to the predictions of about Antichrist taking its seat in the Church of God. The great martyr is appointed patroness of the nuclear missile forces. And this is not only proclamation, but let's move to the next slide. Here you see Orthodox priest consecrates nuclear rocket with holy water. Yes, this is one of the rituals that was established in post-Soviet Russia as church reestablished its position in Russian society and in relationship to Russian state with Russian political elite, that church is blessing and consecrating with holy water. You see, here is the vessel with holy water. The most devastating weapons in world history. And if you look at the next slide, you will see that this is a team of priests also approaching the nuclear weapon with holy water in order to bless it. Let's move to the next slide. This is a very recent, late 2023 event when Putin spoke to the Russian Worldwide Congress, 25th Russian Congress, which is also guided, arranged by Russian Orthodox Church. You see here their uniforms, so to say. And it was very ominous and telling much about the religious nature of this event. It is not Putin alive, it is Putin on video, speaking online. And to both sides of him are icons, absolutely similar, of Christ. And let's move to the explanation in the next slide. Putin's appearance on November 2023 at the Jubilee 25th World Russian People's Council held in Moscow, in the main temple of Russian Orthodox Church, the Cathedral of Christ the Savior, where he made a speech via video link. Before the president's speech, the whole collectively prayed, and since the screen with Putin's image was hanging directly in the center of the stage, it looked as though the assembly was praying to Putin. On both sides of the screen, There were two identical iconographic images of Jesus Christ. On this matter, many bloggers were unusually unanimous. We have read the story about one Christ hanging between two criminals. But one criminal hanging between two Christ is something we've never seen before. And the fact that Putin is a criminal is confirmed by the International Court in Hague, who acknowledged him as a criminal because of kidnapping Ukrainian children to Russia. Let's move further. Now I would like to talk about Eurasianism. It is another political, theological doctrine which is important for understanding contemporary Russian, so to say, intellectual and ideological landscape behind the war. Eurasianism, you know that Eurasia is the continent that embraces both Europe and Asia, one continent. And Eurasianism as an intellectual and ideological movement was founded in 100 years ago, in 1921. The manifesto Exodus to the East, Presentiments and Accomplishments, the affirmation of the Eurasianism, was published in 1922. All these people were immigrants from communist Russia after the October Revolution of 1917. However, their point was that though they emigrated from Leninist and Marxist Russia, they still believed that Russia is destined to be separate and opposite to the West, not strictly on Marxist, but on other foundations. We can now identify Eurasianism as an early form of fascism, of the ideology that later was formulated in Italy as fascism and in Germany as Nazism. Ideocracy, this is how they called the regime they believed will prosper in Russia, is a regime in which the ruling stratum is selected by the quality of loyalty to one overall ruling idea, общая идея правительница. Under ideocratic structure, the last remnants of individualism will disappear, and the human being will realize not only themselves, but also their class and nation as fulfilling certain functions within an organic whole united in a state. This sounds precisely like Mussolini, yes, the cult of the state. And they insisted that in its evolution, the Soviet regime will move from class ideology to nationalist ideology of Eurasianism. And they turned out to be quite quite insightful, because this is where Stalin moved after the death of Lenin, from internationalism to nationalism, patriotism, fight against cosmopolitanism, and so on and so on. So Stalin in Stalinist Soviet Union and its evolution, so to say, fulfilled many of prophecies of early Eurasianists, and some of them who returned to the Soviet Union because they believe that this is, so to say, the fulfillment of their expectations, like very famous literary scholar Svyatopolk Mirsky, were arrested and shot, like many Russian immigrants who under Stalin risked to return to the Soviet Union, thinking that now it is saying farewell to Marxism and is, so to say, resurrecting the old Russian empire. Let's move further. Thank you. There are two movements, maybe you have heard about Slavophilism, which opposed itself to Westernism in the 19th century. I just want to emphasize that Eurasianism was very different from Slavophilism. The main difference between the two movements, though both are anti-Westernist, can be formulated as the opposition between back to the soil romanticism of Slavophiles and an ethnically motivated will to political and technological domination in Eurasianism. Eurasianism succeeded in freeing Slavophilic ideals from their dreamy nostalgia for a pious and patriarchal Rus, integrating them rather into a broad futurist project of a powerful totalitarian state. The far left and far right, former communists and new nationalists, technocrats and nativists, adherents of Orthodox and Islamic fundamentalism, all could potentially find a middle ground in the Eurasianist synthesis, because the very slogan of Eurasianism is turn your back on the West and turn towards the East. So they, so to say, project the unity of that Russian Orthodoxy is much closer in its fundamentalist aspiration to Islam than to Western Christianity. Let's move further. This is Alexander Dugin, perhaps you have heard this name, the leading proponent of Eurasianism. Let's open next slide. He was born in 1962. He is a Russian philosopher, political analyst and strategist. He was the main organizer of the National Bolshevik Party, National Bolshevik Front, and the Eurasia Party. He is the author of more than 40 books, which are, by the way, taught and studied in the Academy of the General Staff at the highest military educational institution. His foundation of geopolitics is the book that is, so to say, the manual of the future struggle against the West for generals, for marshals, for all those who take their causes in this highest institution of highest education in Moscow. Let's move next. He is called the most dangerous philosopher in the world by some foreign Western newspapers. A prolific writer and a militant ideologist, Dugin is the most influential theoretician of Russia's anti-Western and anti-liberal political turn in the 21st century. In the West, Dugin is identified as the main philosopher of Putinism and awarded such epithet as Putin's brain and the most dangerous philosopher in the world. Let's move to the next slide. These are some of his books. This is this illustration of Putin being Putin's brain. Let's move next. This is Dugin in South Ossetia when Russian imperialist, post-Soviet Russia's imperialist expansion began in its war against Georgia 2008, when Russia annexed two territories of Georgia, South Ossetia and Abkhazia. And Dugin was quick to come there and to demonstrate his, not only his solidarity with these occupational forces, but his participation in this military operation. Next, please. Yes, it is he again at the backdrop of the tank. Let's move further. So now, what Eurasianism presents as its, so to say, religious doctrine, religious teaching. It combines these two qualities that in the very beginning I referred to in the citation from Berdyaev, nihilism and apocalypticism. The peculiarity of Dugin as a thinker is his outright hatred of everything that is not just human, but living and existence. This is combined with a kind of religiosity. His writings are full of such concepts as divine subjects, sons of light, mighty spirits, sweet angels, and so on. The combination of high-spiritedness and world hatred goes back to the ancient Gnostic heresy, 1st century, condemned by early Christianity. Gnosticism preached that the existing world lies in evil and must be completely destroyed in order to take the path of high spirituality to enter the world of angels. And this, of course, reminds us of Russian old believers, schismatics, which, as I mentioned, emerged in the 17th century. And Dugin belongs. He belongs officially not to Orthodox Church, to Moscow Patriarchate, but to old believers, but to this sect within old believers that are called Единоверцы, that means of united faith, because they don't condemn Russian Orthodox Church, but hope to, so to say, to convert the mainstream Orthodoxy into old belief, into this schism. And they succeeded in the sense as the latest events and Russian schism with universal Orthodoxy of 2018 demonstrates. Now, Russian Orthodox Church, which fighted old believers through 3 centuries from the 17th century, is itself may be considered to be old believers church, schismatic church. And the major spiritual orientations of old believers are also here. And this is hatred to the existing world and readiness to destroy it in the fire of the apocalypse. And there is another geopolitical content in Eurasianist teaching, not only religious, but geopolitical. Eurasianism teaches on the eternal confrontation between spiritual Russia and materialist West, with Russia being considered the heart of Eurasia and the heir to the horde, Tatar-Mongol horde, which, as you know, took over a significant part of Eastern Europe and including Russia in the 13th and 14th century. And actually Russia, Moscow, princehood emerged as part of horde. That's why you will not be surprised finding that Ukrainian, and not only Ukrainian, but some liberal press in Russia calls contemporary Russia the heiress of the horde in its hostility to the West. Russia being considered the heart of Eurasia, of the entire Eurasian continent, and the heir to the horde, historically destined to unite Europe, especially Eastern, and Asia, especially Central, in a geopolitical confrontation with the Anglo-Saxons. This is very fashionable term in Eurasianist and contemporary Russian official political language, Anglo-Saxons. They hate Anglo-Saxons. USA, England, Canada, Australia, and so on. Let's move to the next slide. Can we move to the next, please? So they see two types of Eurasianists, two types of civilization: sea-oriented, Atlantean, and land-oriented, continental. The antagonism between Atlanticism and continentalism constitutes the major tension of world history, they believe. Atlanticism, exemplified by the legendary Atlantis by ancient Carthage and by the contemporary UK and United States, is characterized by the spirit of trade, profit, and internationalism. Continentalism, best represented by the legendary Hyperborea, the northern land, and by the historical Roman, German, and Russian empires, emphasizes the organic unity of people and their spiritual bonds with the earth. That's why contemporary Russian politics is mostly targeted against the United States and England, less against continental Europe, because they still hope to attract continental Europe to this geopolitical unity of Eurasia, which they hope to build from Portugal to China. Let's move to the next slide. The very form of the landmass on which people stand and live is thought to influence the character of the people's culture and philosophy. The trade associated with the seas that surround island nations like UK or USA Australia, produces an open, extroverted character inclined to mercantilism and intercourse with other nations. That's why cosmopolitanism. While the isolating vastness of continents endangers an introverted character focused on the preservation of tradition. And this is Eurasia. Yes, next, please. This is how they draw the contours of Eurasia on the world map. This is in Cyrillic Russia, and this is Eurasian Empire. So this Eurasian Empire includes, of course, Russia, but also Ukraine, Moldavia, parts of Eastern Europe, Mongolia, Afghanistan. This is a very broad, so to say, contour demonstrating the first approximation to what they see as Russia's geopolitical domain. Next, please. And this is how they see the world. Eurasia, Europe and Asia, is the heartland of the world continents, and Northern America, Africa, Australia, they are islands. So world, island, the external half moon. A lot of, so to say, esoteric occultist terminology is used in their language. So heartland and islands that surround it. Let's move further. Let's move. So here again, what they see as not just Russia, but united, geopolitically united territory of new Russia after its successful expansion. And you see, for example, that Finland here is included, and of course Mongolia is included, and Ukraine is included. And this is the star of chaos, as they call it. Because to succeed Logos, the Western Logos that relies on rationalism, on cognition, on knowledge, comes this chaos of Eurasianist worldview. So let's look further. This is called the Star of Chaos. This is one of their major emblems. Next. Dugin says, Logos has expired and we all will be buried under its ruins unless we make an appeal to chaos and its metaphysical principles and use them as a basis for something new. And this demands the end of the world as we know it. Let's move next. So here is Dugin himself under the map of Eurasia with the star of chaos, which rules this territory. So you see that seemingly abstract doctrines of mystical, esoteric nature, like in Nazi Germany, they are enacted in the current war. It is very mystical and at the same time very politically engaged and destructive. This is mythical allusion to Russia, Hyperborea. Will not stop at these fairy tales, Eurasianist fairy tales. And let's go next. Also, Hyperborea, as they built their image on the basis of some Russian folklore. Let's move further. So, and now the end of times. they believed that traditional eschatology was, so to say, contemplative. They contemplated the end of time. But now we are empowered in Eurasia to make it actual, to bring it into action. The end times and the eschatology means the end, the study of the end or accomplishment of the end, eschatos. The end times and the eschatological meaning of politics will not realize themselves on their own. We will wait for the end in vain. The end will never come if we wait for it, and it will never come if we don't. If the fourth political practice, as he calls his theory, is not able to realize the end of times, then it would be invalid. The end of days should come, but it will not come by itself. This is a task. It is not a certainty. It is an active metaphysics. It is a practice. So the end of the world should be man-made. It is not something we should wait. It is something that we have to produce, the end of the world. Let's move further. And this is the mission of Russia, to put an end to the world. Russia belatedly ended the history of the world only with Peter the Great reforms. It was in prehistoric, ahistoric state for centuries with and after Tatar-Mongol yoke. But then it entered history in order to end it from within. The meaning of Russia is that through the Russian people will be realized the last thought of God, the thought of the end of the world. Death is the way to immortality. Love will begin when the world ends. We must long for it, like true Christians. We are uprooting the accursed tree of knowledge. With it will perish the universe. This is a photo of Putin in several days, 3 days after the beginning of full-scale war with Ukraine. He orders Russia's nuclear deterrent on high alert with Defense Minister Shoigu and the Chief of Military Gerasimov. You see how this man, it was the time of pandemic, COVID, and he is so afraid to get an infection that he sits at the end of the long distance from his colleagues. He is desperately afraid for his life, and at the same time is very determined to bring the end to the entire world. Of course, on the condition that he himself and his closest circle will be saved in a bunker. I'm nearing the end. Let's move with it. Very close. It may be strange, but these catastrophic events, including death of children, are greeted by Orthodox hierarchs with strange joy. For example, in 2018, a fire broke out in Zimnye Vishny shopping and entertainment complex in the city of Kemera. It was a great catastrophic event. 60 people died, including 37 children. And the natural question, is there any religion or ideology that could justify and glorify this death of children? There is such ideology, and this is contemporary Russian Orthodoxy. Filimonov, who is editor-in-chief of the newsletter on God of Orthodoxy, academician of the Orthodox Theological Department, and so on, very important member of Russian Orthodox institution. He wrote, let's move to the next slide. Can we say that what would have been the earthly fate of the children who died in the Winter Cherry shopping mall? Especially now a troubled time with the general corruption of many and many. Would they have been saved from sin? Would they have kept themselves pure for the imperishable life of the future century? Or would they have taken the path of perdition? Would it have been the most convenient time for them to pass on to eternal bliss? So he blesses this fire that destroyed children's lives. And I would say that it is unlikely that even the most brutal tyrants and murderers like Stalin or Hitler would have thought of such a thing, that the death of children in a fire can be blessed as a way of keeping them sinless. At least they, Stalin and Hitler, did confuse mass murder with service to the Almighty. And Filimonov, I will repeat, is a high-ranking church figure. Let's move to the next slide. Vladimir Sharov, the author who died in 2018 and published a very important novel in the end of his life, King of Agamemnon, he writes, so to say, religious historical fiction. He investigates, mostly concentrated on the questions of religious history of Russia. And he sometime talked with his good friend, who used to be a friend of mine as well, one priest, Moscow priest. And this priest said, yes, there were so brutal regime under Stalin. He destroyed many churches and killed so many people, including priests. But that means that heavenly Russia radiates now in the heaven, because no other country has so many saints as ours, because so many innocently dying people. And therefore, in a certain sense, Stalin can be considered a savior of these people. It is the same logic that behind Filimonov glorification of the death of children. They died so as not to be sinful in their earthly life. So let them go as soon as possible to the heaven. And so Sharov gives theological explanation of Stalin's atrocities, purchases, concentration camps, gulag. Stalin has built a huge altar, and purifying us, he is offering sacrifice after sacrifice. Hecatombs of purifying sacrifices are necessary to atone for our sins. He is doing everything to save us. The innocents who are perishing will become our intercessors and prayers before the Lord. That is why it is necessary for us, before the world falls behind the Antichrist, to help them to be saved from sin. That is, there is no place for them on earth. The main thing is that they, having accepted suffering here, will be spared from the torments of the last judgment. That means that the more we kill on this earth innocent, including children, the better for them, the better for the heaven, the better for, so to say, the God's mission of Russian people. Let's move to the next slide. And here we approach our day. Just less than 2 months ago, when Vladimir Putin was inaugurated for his 5th presidential term on May 7th, 2024, Patriarch Kirill, blessing Putin in the Cathedral of Annunciation in the Kremlin, uttered an enigmatic phrase. And I will say with boldness, с дерзновением, God grant that the end of the age also signifies the end of your time in power, addressing Putin. You have everything necessary to fulfill this great service to the homeland for a long time and successfully. What does the Patriarch mean by the end of the age, and why does he himself acknowledge the audacity, boldness of his wish? Certainly he doesn't imply the arrival of, by age he doesn't mean century, he doesn't imply the arrival of the 22nd century when the president would be 148 years old. Age in church language is a translation of the Greek aeon. In the New Testament, aeon refers to the entire existing world, as opposed to the future age, future aeon, which will come after the end, after the death of this world. Next, please. So this is the specific language of church. Theology as clergy, as further emphasized by Patriarch. Citation, may God's blessing and the protection of the Queen of Heaven abide with you in your life until the end of the aeon, of the age, as we say. So what is implied here is the end of the world, as we say, the end of the age. Obviously, the patriarch is quite deliberately addressing this topic, since he knows the boldness of his judgment about the supernatural mystery, the end of the world. This wish for the end of the end to coincide with the end of Putin's time in power testifies to the fact that eschatological obsession has moved from sectarian and neo-fascist and Eurasianist fantasies, like those of Dugin, into the theological narrative, official narrative of the Russian Orthodox Church. Moreover, the mission to complete the end is now entrusted not only to a certain country, Russia, and God-bearing Russian people, but also by the pointing finger of the patriarch to its leader. Let him, Putin, rule until the end of this world, which will be the successful completion of his great service. Next, please. And the patriarch is not alone in this apocalyptic, joyful mood, which is, of course, relying on the force of Russian nuclear weapons. Significantly, right before the inauguration, the Russian military unexpectedly declared exercises on the use of tactical nuclear weapons. In response to these exercises, the Russian Orthodox Church, this time voiced by the archpriest Maxim Kozlov of the Educational Committee, welcomed the announcement with enthusiasm. He encouraged believers not to dread a thermonuclear disaster, reminding them that, after all, citation, Christians used to joyfully await the end of the world, which would bring the kingdom of God closer. And the conclusion. Thus, the most characteristic feature of the latest Russian apocalypticism is that, unlike all previous such movements, it is technically armed. To embody its yearnings for a universal end, it possesses nuclear weapons which can indeed bring completion to the all life on Earth. This objectification of planetary doom gives this apocalypticism the power and argument that previous Gnostic sects, including all believers, lacked. They dreamt of a purifying fire that would burn the world, might and sin, but were powerless to bring it to Earth. Now such power exists, and there is a vast country, Russia, that necrosectarians want to turn into the apocalyptic vanguard of humanity in order to carry out the mission of its self-immolation. There is a leader paving the way to this goal, and there is clergy blessing him. This is the end of my story. Not easy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Epstein. And it's not easy to start asking questions, and we will not tire you with too many, but as people prepare questions and comments, the only obvious thing I can ask, can we estimate how widespread are these use in the population in general? Is it possible to do any kind of, you named of clergy, the higher up clergy, which gangs up with the authorities, but we all know how cynical and passive are Russian people in general. So is it possible that all this is superficially equivalent to Soviet propaganda, to communist times, and when people, what I'm trying to say, that when communist regime fell in 91, nobody came to defend it. So how deep this propaganda can go?
Well, there are different estimations. Some estimations put the number of Putin support to 70%. The number of those who voted for Putin, according to official statistics, and it was very, very is distorted, was, I think, 88%. There are other estimates which say that approximately 15% of population is more or less liberal, mostly this is middle class. 15% of population is really emotionally and intellectually pro-fascist, and in between 70% they are like quagmire. That means they will join this party that will prevail. They joined Gorbachev when Gorbachev was the president. They joined Yeltsin, then they joined Putin. So this is the surprising and disgusting, I would say, plasticity of Russian popular mind to be under the leader and to follow his steps. And now the leader is definitely going in the direction of the total war.
Very, very interesting, comprehensive discussion. So we should actually watch it slowly again and decipher everything. So I met Dugin at Johns Hopkins University during his presentation. He was a popular figure before the war, invited to different places, and I even sat next to him during our dinner and talked to him actually about Russia and Central Asia, and he explained me why Central Asia should be part of Russia. So it was actually long ago. And I know that his actually slogan that Russia must expand in order to survive. And my question is, who can continue his so-called mission to save Russia in the future? And then the second question is, who actually supports Dugin besides Putin and his allies? Why he is still popular in Russia? Thank you.
Thank you. It's interesting. What year did you meet him?
I met maybe in 2004, 5. I don't really, and he actually he talked very well. He cited German philosophers. He even tried to speak some German, and he actually was extremely popular and look like an exotic figure, very different compared to the other speakers.
Yes, of course. He loves German philosophy and especially Heidegger, National Socialist philosophy of Heidegger, and other German fascist or proto-fascist or neo-fascist thinkers are among his favorites. I didn't quite understand the first question. Who will inherit his mission? Whose mission and when?
I mean that Dugin is relatively popular, and he has a mission that Russia should expand in order to survive. He tried to persuade at least Putin and his allies, but I think that he is not the only figure. And that's the question. Who will be next to Dugin in the future? And another question: what what group of people support Dugin? Why he's relatively popular in Russia? Not even in Russia, even in the West.
That's the point, because unlike Slavophiles of the 19th and maybe 20th century, who concentrated on Slavs, Dugin appeals to a broad international community of neo-fascists, of rightist thinkers, of those who belong to the so-called great tradition, which is worship of the ancient Aryan cultures and presupposes reintroduction, for example, of caste systems like in ancient India. So it is. It seems to be a kind of fantasy delving deeply in the past. And Atlantid, for example, Atlantis is one of the images that he operates, believing that this continent that disappeared thousands of years ago was the prototype of Atlantean civilization of the present, including UK, USA, and so on. So there are many fantasies here, but he's at the same time very practical in trying to integrate these neo-fascist and extremely rightist parties on the continent in Europe. He has some kind of relationship with Marine Le Pen, with some people in Italy, in France, in Germany, and the entire, how to say, the entire new wave of rightist shifts to the right that we observe even in the recent elections to the European Parliament. It is one of explanations of why these ideas are still very popular. And I don't know who will inherit Dugin in the past. I don't know such young, outstanding theoreticians. So far, he, so to say, fills this niche by himself.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Epstein. Do we have more comments or questions, please? We've been here more than an hour, and we will need to thank our guest. It's a profound panorama of questions and not many answers, I'm afraid. We don't know what will happen tomorrow. I had one more question. I thought that 1 year ago, we had this aborted putsch of Prigozhin. And if anything, this was one momentous indication of Russian people supporting the strongman who is next to them. I remember Anna Politkovskaya, the murdered human rights activist, saying once that in Chechen war, the person next to you with machine gun was the power.
Mm.
So it's very obvious and very troubled situation when, as we observe now, at what happens in Russia amounting to slow underground, if you wish, civil war. Events like Prigozhin's putsch shows us that if anything, local population will not only passively but enthusiastically support those who seize power in a very ancient way. Plus, as you profoundly showed, if they sprinkle it with some attractive ideology.
Yes.
So do you think that events like that we will witness events like this more and more, considering last week's events in the Caucasus, in Dagestan, and whatnot may be happening in next already months, if not years?
I think that the best outcome of all these events will be disintegration of Russia as a political body. And I started to think so even before the Soviet Union disintegrated. In 1990, I published an essay titled on Russias in plural, where I concluded that Russia, in its headlong movement back to its origins, should reach such a stage that preceded Tatar-Mongol yoke, which actually was the unifying pattern within which the Russia emerged as imperial state. To the time of Kievan Rus, with its feudal disintegrated princehoods. And this is what may be the ultimate destiny of Russia, the plurality of princehoods, the plurality of lands, the plurality of regions, which may unite into something like European Union, but will be ethnically and politically, culturally independent. And I see that this remains the major outline of the best of all possible Russian futures.
Thank you. Katerina, have a comment? Yeah, you are muted. You're muted.
No, I apologize. I'm so sorry. I've just been listening, and it's actually a bit terrifying. Everything that we've been hearing, truly terrifying. But no, I apologize. I don't have a comment to weigh in on today.
You see,
Thank you.
unfortunately, many people, let me just conclude. Unfortunately, many people in the West look at the current war as something very local, with unimportant possible consequences. Okay, let Russia have a little bit more territories, several, 4 or 5 more Ukrainian regions. The world will not die of it. But I think that they underestimate the evil energy. The same energy, maybe a different kind of energy, but also evil, furious, aggressive, that animated Russia in its Marxist utopian transformation. And this force is even more dangerous because it is based not allegedly on the heritage of Enlightenment, Marxism, rationality, economic productivity, and so on. It is based on pure fascist categories of force, of blood, and even more dangerous, the end of the world. There is both Italian and German varieties of fascism that had their visions of future. And they didn't want to destroy the land where they come because they hope to transform this land, to keep it for their future transformations and so on. But Russia, unlike even Hitler and Mussolini, doesn't have any vision of future. It destroys every land, every part of Ukraine and other nations which it occupies. And this is in accords with the spirit of apocalypticism, which I try to describe.
Thank you. Thank you for your deep and fearless analysis. And we hope that this will be watched, this lecture will be watched by many who want to learn about what is going on right now in our history. Thank you. I will ask Dr. Shrey to say a few words in Ukrainian to our viewers.
Дорогі браття і сестри в Україні, ми зберігаємо вас у наших щоденних думках і молитвах. Нехай милосердний Бог тримає вас у своїй опіці. До наступного тижня. Прощаємося.
Слава Україні!
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!